So, how do you feel about the difference between, because I know you wanted to say there's a difference between the DSA and Social Democrats.
USA. Yeah,
You wanted
yeah. There's a huge difference now more than ever. When I first joined in 2008, DSA was more Harringtonian, which means they were like the original founder of DSA, Michael Harrington, who was a left-wing sociologist and a social liberal. Well, now he's the enemy, according to DSA, because he's not for the authoritarian version of socialism like in Russia or the Soviet Union or China in the 1950s. But what he is he's a sociologist that believes in the more social democratic or the Nordic model of social democracy, which is where what my group supports, Social Democrats USA. We would support the more Nordic model, like what Bernie Sanders and AOC and Zoran Mandami are talking about, even though DSA backs them. One of the most ridiculous things I heard from a DSA member was that, well, if you don't believe in the workers' ownership of the means of production, then we're not going to back you. Well, we're not there yet. Do you really expect us to be in favor of the workers' ownership and the means of production when that's like 100 years away? Whatever happened to like welfare policies, whatever happened to a mixed economy, whatever happened to labor policies, unionization, nationalization, and free utilities, that's all socialist values. So I think there's a huge difference now more than ever. And the fact that DSA in the past would have never had a Stalinist or a Maoist caucus within their ranks, ever, ever. So now they look at us as like the Zionists when they should understand there's more than one form of Zionism. There's democratic Zionism, there's labor Zionism, there's bigoted Zionism. That's what the settlers in the West Bank, but that's bad Zionism. But there is democratic Zionism, which people also have to understand that there is. I mean, they've never been to Israel, they've never been to Tel Aviv. And one of the things about Israel is they're mimicking our version of democracy because they want it for themselves. Remember, Israel was founded as a democratic socialist republic and has moved to the right ever since 1967. So basically, since it's pushed to the right, they don't have as active a local government as we do. We have very, very, very active local governments. Where with us, it's act globally, think locally, or think globally, act locally. That would be a huge thing in the United States, and it works too because we're such a good welfare policy distributor. We distribute the benefits, and also with the military-industrial complex, we can also, with the way our welfare policy and our regulatory policies work, we can get the Elliot Spitzer on the cop on the beat to be the white collar cop, prosecuting white collar criminals like the $500 toilet seat or the $500 hammer in the military. You know what I mean? So that's another thing that we could do that's different. That's more welfare state policy. But no, DSA is where we went to the left literally because we would have never in the past supported sex work decriminalization. We would have never supported a two-state solution. It would have been a little more hawkish. We support a two-state solution now while supporting the national aspirations of the Palestinians. And just like blanket Michael Harrington is some weirdo Zionist. That's so pathetic. They don't even know what Michael Harrington's all about. Never even read one of his books. So no, DSA I'm very unhappy with, and I don't plan on renewing my membership not in a long time.
So locally, I know that they've been working on the New York Health Act. They've been having meetings. So I think
Closed
that's a
meetings.
positive thing.
Closed meetings. They knew I was in Ken more than ever called on me. If anybody's going to support New York Health Act, it's going to be a social democrat. You know what I mean? I'm on Medicaid. I'm on Medicare. I'm on Social Security. Who says I'm not going to support the New York Health Act or support a single payer system? It's just ridiculous. There needs to be a lot more. How do I say? Common sense policies within the left being so fucking woke that it just bit them in the ass.
So at the state level, then in New York State, do you think there's any, major difference between the Social Democrats and DSA?
No, because in New York State, the Social Democrats are DSA. But the thing is, what DSA doesn't realize is that if you're a Brian Nowak or you're a Julia Salazar or you're an AOC, if you make it to that level of power, whether it's town board member, town supervisor, that town supervisor, or Julia Salazar, state senator, or AOC congresswoman, congratulations, you just went from being a democratic socialist to a social democrat because you're at that level of power. That makes sense?
So, I mean, it seems like it's more of an ideological difference besides actual policy difference. If that is that too basic of a summation?
Yeah, it is because you could say the same thing for the weather people versus the Lyndon Johnson and the more moderates like Dr. King and Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph. They hated those guys because they got too close to Lyndon Johnson. But what they turned out to be is more the weathermen and the weather underground, which broke away from I think the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which turned as radical as fuck. So talk about unity, there was none.
I mean, there's definitely factionalism in a lot of movements, I think, but I mean,
On the left, it's a circular firing squad.
I think some people have said that before, but I mean, in terms of political parties, it doesn't seem like this is representative of that. It seems like this is more of a political ideology as opposed to an actual functioning political party. Is that fair to say?
Fair to say, because the only acting political party within DSA would be the Justice Democrats, because they work to get progressives elected, or so Democratic Socialists, whatever you want to call it. But no, none of them are filed. They're filed as political parties, so that's what they are according to the state. But they're not on the ballot, so technically aren't political parties because they're not on the ballot. They got to be in the on the state ballot in order to classify to be a state party, which is a state organization.
So then you see SDSA, or I'm sorry, Social Democrats and DSA as organizations that try to influence the Democratic Party since they are not a political party. Is that how you see
More
that
so
then?
us than DSA. You're right. More so us than DSA that would actually try to influence the Democratic Party as opposed to overthrowing it.
And so, what difference besides having a political ballot line is there with the Working Families Party with the ideas of Social Democrats and DSA? I mean, they have a ballot line, but what other difference is there in terms of philosophy, right? I mean,
The Social
and policy.
Democrat, well, the DSA left the Socialist International, which is the umbrella organization for the whole union of socialist parties and social democratic parties and labor parties worldwide. This is the party Congress. They left that because it was too neoliberal. I actually met the Spanish president, Pedro Sanchez, the year I went. I was a guest at the conference in Madrid. But to be an influential party in the United States as a socialist is just as good as being a party affiliate because you're getting the word out there. You're not going to get elected as quick as you want to because people are scared of the S word. But with the Working Families Party, they're not a member of the SI. They're not socialist. They're progressive. They're more a community organization than anything, and that they would align more with social democratic policies than the workers' ownership of the means of production. So where DSA thinks they got a foothold in the Working Families Party, I'd say organized labor could do better.
So then you don't really see a huge influence on the Democrats from any of the Social Democrats in DSA, or what
I'd
about the
see a
working
huge
family?
difference. It depends on the local because if you have a local of Stalinists that don't want to affiliate with the Democrats, they're going to be third party. Or if you have like a local like the Justice Democrats who want to incentivize the Democrats to move more to the left or more to the progressive left, you can do that, and they've been doing that very auspiciously.
And then
So
what
yeah,
would you say
they're not. Yeah, I would say you're right.
is there a difference between the Justice Democrats and the Social Democrats and the DSA
No, Justice Democrats and Social Democrats.
besides running candidates? Yeah.
Justice Democrats and Social Democrats would fall in line with DSA's North Star Caucus, which is their Social Democratic Caucus within DSA. They have a Social Democratic Caucus, but it's called North Star, Minnesota North Star Democratic Socialists. And then we would be the small group that actually holds on to the ideology, and then the left wing locals of DSA could choose whether they want to be a Democratic Centralist, which is like more Soviet Union esque, versus Democratic Socialist, in my opinion, which is nothing but mixed economy, in my opinion. Now, a lot of people don't think that way, but I do. I think that Democratic Socialism is a form of mixed economy, can be, even though it sounds more radical. Mixed
When
economy
you
would be a social democracy like Europe and Nordic model.
So that would still be those who want to own a company as opposed to a state centralized entity basically
Yeah,
owning all means of services being produced and distributed. You would
yeah,
still in the philosophy of a mixed economy would be that you have the central government, but it's still separate from some of the private entities.
yeah.
Is that what you would say?
You have private entities, but they're more heavily regulated. That's all. And then there's unionization, there's democratic workplace. There's something more than the workers' ownership of the means of production. It's there. I mean, I like to say that Lenin and Stalin are dead, but Marx is everywhere.